You so much, Sarah, and thank you so much to everybody for joining us for this webinar. Um, the Cornelia Hahn Oberlander International Landscape Architecture Prize is a biennial prize in landscape architecture created by the Cultural Landscape Foundation. The award is made to a living practitioner, collaborative, or team for their creative, courageous, and visionary work in the field of landscape architecture. The prize examines the state of landscape architecture through the honoree's practice, showcasing how landscape architecture and its practitioners are transforming the public realm by addressing social, ecological, cultural, environmental, and other challenges in their work. So in 2025, it was the third award of the Oberlander Prize, for which I am the curator, following Julie Bargmann in 2021 and the late Kong Jian-yu in 2023. The jury was made up of practitioners and academics from all over the world. Claire Agre from the US, Arthur Adair from Kenya, Kirsten Bauer from Australia, Ellen Breu from Denmark, Margarita Hova from Spain and the US, Samip Padora from India, and Dorothy Tang from Singapore. So I'm just going to introduce our panelists for today. We're joined by Claire Agre, the jury chair, and of course the man himself, our honoree Mario Schjetnan. Claire may be less well known to you than Mario. She's a partner and co-founder of Unknown Studio Landscape Architecture and Urban Design based in Baltimore, Maryland, in the US. Prior to that, she was a principal in the New York City office of West 8. Broadening her landscape background with her landscape practice, with a background in painting and ecology, her work links beauty, care, and collective action. I first met Claire when she was leading what turned out to be the winning entry for Changing Course, an interdisciplinary international design competition seeking solutions for the lower Mississippi Delta. She's also led design and implementation of a diverse portfolio of projects, including Governor's Island in New York, North Meadow on the Rose Kennedy Greenway in Boston, Harbor Place in Baltimore, and the Portland Museum of Art. Now, Mario, I am going to assume needs pretty much no introduction because my guess is that many of you are already his fans. There's also a series of excellent articles about Mario and the work of GDU on the Cultural Landscape Foundation's excellent website. The articles provide detail of his and the firm's biography and an introduction to their work and specific projects. Today, we are going to dive into a conversation with Mario that I hope is going to give you more insight into the practice and the people involved. And so with that, I am going to hand over to Claire to begin. I should just say we will be asking Mario a series of questions. The format is going to be pretty conversational, and we will also take the opportunity to include your questions in the webinars program. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Well, I am just ecstatic to be able to have the first of what I hope are many conversations over the course of your tenure as our current laureate, Mario. I will say one of the high points of this year was to be able to participate in a call where we shared with Mario and his team the selection of Mario and GDU as the current Oberlander laureate, diving deep into your portfolio and discussing at length with the jury all of the impacts and nowness of your work was just a pleasure and a privilege. So today we're going to have a conversation. As Elizabeth said, please put your questions in the chat as we go. And Elizabeth and I have some thoughts and some questions that we'll lead off with here, Mario. But take us wherever you want to take us. And to start, I just wanted to kick off one of the things that I just think is most distinctive about your work, and I would say maybe what I would consider one of the most prominent things that I think Mexico can teach the rest of the hemisphere in terms of design. So just to lead off with this first question, paraphrasing the scholar, writer, and teacher of landscape history, J.B. Jackson, who I'm sure everybody knows.
Yes.
We really considered, when we were looking at your work, GDU's work to be really emblematic of this idea that history and memory and mythology, landscape architecture, are those things made visible and palpable and visceral in the public realm. These are really strong through lines in your work, and I would love to hear more about history and memory and mythology in your work, and what in particular can Mexico teach the field about these things?
Yes. Hello, both Claire and Elizabeth. It's wonderful to be here. It's an honor, and truly wonderful, happy about being in having the opportunity to talk, to have a conversational webinar here about these things, these subjects, this theory, this practice. Well, yes, Mexico, fortunately, it's a very rich culture. It is a culture that was formed through many years. It goes back to, well, at least 2,000 years before Christ. First, of course, it is a mestizo, a mestizo continent. It's part of the mestizo continent, which is the Americas. Not only some scholars have called this Americas the mestizo continent. No, so it starts full 15,000 years ago with immigration from Asia, from Siberia, and they disseminated over various areas of what is North America, and Central America. It starts basically with compositions of the northern cultures of Mexico, what we call and scholars have called arid America, populations of native cultures, very strong cultures, such as the Anasazi, the Pueblo, the Paquimé Indians, which habitated the northern part, the northern part of Mexico, what's called arid America. Then the Mesoamerican, which goes back to 2,000 years before Christ, the Toltec, the Teotihuacano, the Aztec, which goes all the way to again 10,000 years before, 5,000 years before Christ to the 16th century, when the Spaniards came. And then the southern and oriental part of Mexico, which is populated by basically the Olmecs and the Mayans, and Tabasco and Yucatan. These cultures created a of nature. All of it was a very religious in all the aspects of it in their lifetimes and their political as well as agricultural and so on. This cosmology was populated by divinities, the different myths and so on. The plum serpent, the relationship of the inner world with the sky, the pyramids. What is a pyramid? A pyramid is the connection with the inner world and the ascension towards getting into the sky, into the ether, into the big sky. They were very religious, and I can show you, for instance, a slide about a sculpture by Diego Rivera in Chapultepec Park. Please, Brenda, can you bring it over? Yes, put it all full screen. Well, this is a magnificent sculpture by Diego Rivera um, about Tlaloc, the god of rain, and you see here Rivera on the left hand is giving the seeds of corn, and then through his body he processes it, which is the water, of course, where the raining water and soil, and into the right-hand side, you see finally the main aspect of agricultural in pre-Hispanic times, which is the maize, no? The maize. So Tlaloc is one of the biggest, the most important divinities in the mythical aspects of the pre-Hispanic people all over Mesoamerica, and as well as Quetzalcoatl, which is the relationship of with this relationship of the inner world through the plum serpent, So Mexican artists in the 1920s started to look into Mexico before we were looking into Europe, and finally, as Octavio Paz, our one of our main theorists and historians and poets, a Nobel Prize winner, said Mexican artists and intellectuals started to look not anymore to the outside of Mexico, but to the inside. I found that under the soil, they found the original culture, which was under the ground, but it was alive. That's a beautiful kind of mythical aspect of it. No, so that has permeated into the 20s, 40s, 30s, 40s, 60s, and 70s, a way to look at our myths, our original myths, culture, and so on. And all the way from, the dancers, the contemporary dance, Limón in New York, to cinematographers, to muralists, to architects, to literature, etc., etc., etc. No, so it's a very powerful kind of a legacy that we have in the later 20th century for us, as we were forming ourselves as students and beginning our work in architecture. Then came, you can take out the photograph. Thank you very much, Brenda. And then came, for instance, well, as you know, in 1520, Mexico was conquered by Spain. But who were the people who came from Spain? People from the south part of Spain and from the north part of Spain. And these people have been just liberated from the Arabic world, the Mudéjar culture, 800 years of Arabic and Mudéjar and domination of Spain, which left a completely another layer of culture. For instance, in language, most of the words in Spanish, in terms of architecture, in terms of architectural elements, in terms of agriculture, in terms of a landscape, actually come from the Arabic, and then of course we have the Latin, the Greek, and so on, which are the components of the Spanish language, which is 1,000 years old. then that created between the original cultures and a mestizaje, what that mestizaje is. It's the one place that the Spaniards actually mixed with the original cultures here and created a syncretism, a syncretism in terms of myths and beliefs and traditions. You see, for instance, dances which are absolutely pre-Hispanic, but at the same time, they are Spanish or they are from other parts of North Africa, no, in Mexico. So this created a very rich kind of mixture of cultures, a new man, let's say. The some of the historians in Mexico say, no, we were not conquered, that we were discovered, and we were, it was not a conquest, it was a discovery and a mixture, you see. So that creates this. So in our work, it comes through studying those cultures. We have in our education in general in Mexico, but also in the cosmogony, in the cosmogony and toponymia, for instance. Xochimilco means in Nahuatl, which is it's a very alive actually now in language. It actually, for instance, Xochimilco means a place where to grow flowers, for instance, and we use those names all over Mexico, you see, and into Central America, of course. And that gives you enormous clues to memories, and history. There's a very important book which is called The Inspiration of the Vencidos, which is the conquered, the inspiration of the conquered, by Maria Garibay, an anthropologist, who tells us what actually there was a conquest, of course, a religious conquest, a Catholic conquest, but at the same time there was a conquest from the point of view of myths in the Spaniards that came. That created this culture that we are in Mexico, which is very rich. So that is, for instance, another. The Moctezuma cypress, the actual name we use is Ahuehuete. Ahuehuete means the wise old man from the water. You see, it's so rich. It's very poetic. You see, they had, for instance, in the Nahuatl, they had, well, easily 50 names for different conditions of water. You see, it's like Japanese, no? They have so many conditions for explaining bamboo with wind, bamboo erected, bamboo, green bamboo, etc., etc. In Mexico, it's the same way. It's a kind of a very, very, very poetic language. And, those connections of names, like in German, for instance, the milpa means the agricultural field, and we still use those names, you see. So that comes from, again, it's a way to look at the world, that creates a philosophy, Yes.
And so we see this incredibly rich cultural foundation from this very particular history.
Yes.
When we look at your work, it's incredibly diverse, both ecologically and aesthetically. We see a level of this kind of real site specificity. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about how you find the spirit of each of these different processes and how that sort of
Yes.
feeds into the practice?
That is critical, because actually that's what we call here in our office to search for the nature of the project. to search for the soul of the project. What is the project about? It's okay. Of course, we're giving a program and all the needs and so on of the clients and of the communities and so on. But of course, we start, and this is what makes our work site specific. It's not about repeating a style, a specific style and so on, which other great architects and landscape architects have gone through. But ours is looking what each specific site gives us, establishes the nature of place. This starts with this genus loci, and our it comes from the writings of Christian Norbert Schulz, for instance, the genus loci, etc. And the it's the whole investigation of the variables of place, which of course starts with the scientific, of course, what we landscape architects are, starting with the ecological scientific, the evolution of and the dynamics of nature in place, the temporal, the seasonal, and so on. And we, of course, we incorporate that. That's what we have learned in our schools. The technical, of course, the man-made, the precedent, the interventions that create the place and the precedents and so on. And then, of course, this gets into the cultural, first the historical layers. What are the historical layers of place? That is the onion. How do you peel the onion? As Claude Lévi-Strauss used to say, the great philosopher, and also anthropologist. And so we start to peel the place, But like I said, the toponymical, the myths of place, the stories of place. We have to investigate those aspects, because all of those start to give us the different aspects of the nature of place. What are the invariants of this place? In terms of, for instance, it comes from the stone, that comes from the use of stone in that region of any part of the world and so on, or the crafts and so on that are done to create place, to create architecture, to create a construction of some kind. So that gives the aspect of the historical aspect. And then another aspect that we do research is the poetical and the perceptual, the visual, the emotional aspect of place. Almost 90% of the projects I have visited, or the projects I have done, I have visited thoroughly. And not only from the point of view of learning about the visual aspect of place. We had a wonderful teacher at Berkeley, as a geographer, how to read the landscape, in those aspects, but also the emotional, like you were saying, J.B. Jackson, is the place eerie or the place exuberant? Is the place dangerous? Is the place noisy? Is the place completely, just is it the place you hate to be in that place? So you have to transform it. It's exactly when you go to a post-industrial site and it's inhuman. Basically, the post-industrial site is how do you instill again humanity in a process, of course, of a factory or a place of extraction or so on, that was basically non-human, of course, no? So how do you instill there this part of the humanity? You're going to transform it into a place of being, into a place of habitation, So that gives us connections with the phenomenological aspect of place, what is called by being there, estar allí, estar allí, you being there, and then another aspect is the literary. if the way poets and writers write about plays is extraordinary, no? It is
Yes.
truly, well, it's an art. Well, for instance, if you want to read about the the basin of Mexico, the geography of the central part of Mexico, you have to read Los Bandidos del Río Frío, you know, it's a novel about mid-18th century, mid-19th century Mexico, you know, about bandits of Rio Frío, the bandits of Rio Frío by Manuel Paino, you know, and he describes all of the different regions and all of the different the lakes, still the lakes there, and the rivers and the pine trees versus the other areas which are semi desertic and so on and so forth. So there was also another great writer, Alejandro Carpentier, a Cuban writer, you know. Was of course translated into English and to many other languages. Carpentier founded what it came to lo real maravilloso, the real marvelous, which gave part as to other writers such as Garcia Marquez, you know, for instance, about the aspect of the mythical and the poetic and the ethereal and so on, you know, the real and the ethereal, the mythical, you know. And for instance, I took a class at Harvard, which was extraordinary, with Carlos Fuentes, one of the best writers in Mexico of the late 20th century, which he gave a class which is called A Story of Literature, a story of Mexico, of Latin American history, a study of Latin American history through its literature. So he started giving you all the books that were written in different aspects of novels in different in different areas, you know, starting from the 16th century with the book by Bernal Díaz del Castillo, which he wrote about the conquest of Mexico, no? But he said, for instance, Fuentes, you say, listen, the book by Bernal Díaz del Castillo was written 40 years later when he was already in Spain. So it was not only memory, it was only emotions, it was just perception, no? It was not true facts, but it was perception. So that comes from the 18th century philosopher Giambattista Vico, which wrote a book which was called The New Science, which is introduced history as literature, as memory, as perception, you know, and on you go to books, to different books. For instance, I just a few years ago I read a book about Taipei, the evocation of place of the Southern Pacific Islands, written by Herman Melville, and it is illustrated by Miguel Covarrubias, a Mexican artist. You know, it's in English. It's one of the 20s and the 1930s of the United States. It's just a rich book, very, very beautiful book, and gives you the evocation of all the conditions of the landscape there, you know, on the islands with Taipei and the Maori indigenous people, you know. D.H. Lawrence, for instance, who came to Mexico in the 20s, wrote one of his best novels called The Plum Serpent. The Plum Serpent is about the myth of Quetzalcoatl, you know, as new gods had to bring back and to get away of the Catholicism, you know, and to bring back again the religion of the Hispanic people. It's a wonderful novel, you know, and so he talks about the bullfights, he talks about Mexico, he talks about the lakes in Michoacán and Jalisco, you know, and so on. So it's another book that you have to read if you want to know about the landscape of Mexico, you know. He wrote also a book called Mornings in Mexico, about each of cultures in Oaxaca, all the way to Arizona and New Mexico, no? And so he lived in different parts of Mexico, and then went up to the United States, and he wrote these books, which are extraordinary descriptions of places, no? And also, well, there's also this Mexican artist and anthropologist called Miguel Covarrubias, for instance, of Tahiti. He wrote a complete book about Tahiti that is describing the landscape, describing the anthropological, describing the myths, the stories, and so on. So I think literature it's a very important part for us as landscape architects to understand place, to understand, because there's different views with different, with their culture, because they talk about people, you see. And I find this very rich whenever you find a book, which also I recently wrote a book by Nobel Prize from Africa called Paradise. It talks about East Africa, and it's about a wonderful book. You have to look for it, and so on. Or another book that I found from Napoleon, which written by a British writer about the gardens. Napoleon loved gardens. You see, he created a love of gardens, and in fact, he created the botanical garden in Paris. Well, it was in the 18th century, but now we're talking about he actually did the zoo there in the Jardin des Plantes in Paris, and also the zoo and also the Museum of Natural History. He started it, and so Napoleon was another great landscape architect by let's say by volition, let's say. So all of these aspects, finally, what do you come to? Because this is lots of information for the site. We come back to the question. So you come back to synthesize. That's what any great creator has to have. Any great artist is to how do you dilute all that in the mind, and how you discuss that with your team to start to define what is truly the nature of the project.
Mhm. I think I'm going to go to my next question, which is a very serious question in a second. But everything you're talking about in terms of the importance of literature and cultural imagination and this sort of game of telephone amidst cultures, of how we each see paradise differently but also the same. It reminds me, there was an article a few years ago by Phoebe Liquar, and she had a great title. It was "Why So Serious, Landscape Architect?" And she talked about how if we're only doing, an analytical site analysis based on terrain and GIS, we're missing the optimism and the joyful artistry side. And so I want to take Mario Schjetnan's book club and all of the books that you've just recommended. It seems like every single one of them has fed an original idea probably within each site-specific landscape. And I don't think that's taught as part of our process. Usually it's considered not as serious, as learning all the computer programs. But I think it's just completely critical because we are an art form, not.
Exactly. In your projects, you have to aspire to art. It doesn't come easily, but if you have that aspiration, is the capacity to 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 move emotions. You see,
Yeah,
the capacity to think. It's another aspect of art. No, the
yeah.
capacity to make you think. That's what some philosophers used to say about art. No, este, what is so. Not every project is art, of course. Not every painting is art. Not every sculpture is art. Not every movie is art. But when it comes to finally to make it classical, and classical means being permanent, Classical means permanent. There's a new classicism, for instance, in jazz or in contemporary music. No, there is the contemporary classicism is for instance, well, some of the works of Philip Glass, no, I mean, and so on. But there's also the classicism of the Romantic period and so on. No? So when a landscape becomes classical, it has aspired to the level of art, and it has become art, and it moves your emotions, and it moves you and makes you think. It makes you think about many things. And that's what it's very beautiful of all of the new artists which are dealing with the environment or with aspects of environment, of aspects of the physics of art, which is the contemporary art. No, it's not only about painting, but it's about how they're discovering light and so on, and so forth. And not every work of any and many artists, not many work like Picasso. Not every work of Picasso is art. No, so that you fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope to draw a line here. I mean, the right to art and your focus on connecting different parts of culture and the aspiration of art is so deep in the work, and I don't think it's the point of beginning for everybody. I want to kind of pick up on another aspect of your work, which is very tied to it. And I'll just put this a little autobiographical for a second, which is just to say, when I was coming up in design school about 20 years ago, there was a huge focus more narrowly on ecological and explicitly avoiding political or social advocacy. And I would say, I think it's fair to say that era is over. We must absolutely discuss the socio-political context of the projects that we're working on. So I wanted to kind of tie art to the social, and understand, how do you take a position on landscape architecture as a commons or a common good or a role in shaping the world? How do your values, in addition to your interest in the artistry and the cultural, how do the values that Mario Schjetnan and GDU bring shape the work?
Yes. Well, I come from an era. I graduated in 1968. So you can imagine, I went to Berkeley 68 to 70,
Good timing.
and we had a student revolt here in Mexico for democracy, and as well as the human rights and so on in the U.S. during the 60s. So that make us very kind of political in a way. I would like to, for instance, show you a project that we did. It's our most small project, public project. It's the Cornerstone project, Festival Gardens in Napa, California, and well, they asked me to do this project. They invited to 20 landscape architects from around the world, and this garden wants to be a. And I asked, what is this project about? And I said, well, it is about contemporary landscape architecture. Oh, great. So what is the theme? No, it's open. It's completely open. That's the most difficult project you can get because there are no clues to the project, So I started to think, what should I do about it? And I was living in Arizona at that time, and I used to go to clean my car in a place where there were immigrants. That was the first place of connection. And so I started to see these guys coming up from the border, from Arizona, all through the border to Tucson and so on. And I was deeply impressed because I was this privileged Mexican in directing the landscape architecture department in Arizona, in the University of Arizona. And all these people were trying to make, their lives better and to send their families money. So please, Brenda, put the project of the I started to say, okay, I'm going to talk about these people because they are negated. They are they are not they are not there. They produce, but they are not recognized. They are they are invisible. That's the word I was looking for. I started to do research about that. I made a connection with a museographer, and then we connected with the College of Mexico and the border. There's a sociological and economics very distinguished university called the College of Mexico. I said, well, I have to talk about this project. I have to talk about these people. I came up with this little project. Like I say, it's only about 10 meters, about 30 feet by 20 meters at 60 feet, and it's overlooking a vineyard and in Napa. The first thing I did was this metal wall, of course, which is now, this was done, by the way, 20 years ago, and still more present than anywhere, anytime, as we know, the new kind of war against immigrants is peaked in the United States. And so we were talking about this here. At least at this time, we were talking about the invisibility. So we found out that two, 4 out of 5 people working in different areas of the economy in California. One was the agriculture, the wineries and the agriculture. Secondly, construction, and thirdly, landscape. Of course, these are these are the industries that Mexicans come to, or Latin Americans and so on. Mesoamerica, people from Central America. And the first thing, of every 5 people that came in, the 5 immigrants, 4 were illegal, like this. No, 1 was legal. So that created a precedent. So these illegal people, what were their problems? No, the problems were that they couldn't find they couldn't cash checks because they didn't have a license and so on. So anyway, put the other please, the former, please, muévele para atrás. No, para atrás, otra vez. Ahí está, déjale ahí. The project is about first entering the United States through the metal wall, and we did a slip there, as you can see, an incisive line here in the metal wall, taking all the information about how many people die in this process, how many people go about it, how many people survive, or how many people actually get over, And that's why we put all this gravel and chipped bases, clay bases. And then in this red wall, I put the other side of the story, why people emigrate, but it's not the US being the bad guy and Mexico the good guy. No. It's both problems. It's an integration. Of course, why people emigrate? Because we in Mexico do not produce enough work for many people, and they're very badly paid and so on. So people emigrate. That's why people emigrate to any other parts of the world. That's why people have emigrated from Italy to the US or Ireland and so on. And so you enter finally to the US through that wall, and you find yourself a garden, a small garden. So you can see there, the visitor can irrigate the garden, they can take care of the garden, or they can sit and meditate on the garden. You can see, and we also did some vineyards, looking to the big vineyard, of course, which is, like I say, well produced by immigrants, and then as you turn around, you find this wall, this stone wall, and in this stone wall, we put the photographs of the people who actually built this garden. And yes, there were 5 workers. 4 were from illegal. One was legal, and they came all from Michoacan, the state of Michoacan, which is a beautiful state. And we call this the memory wall, and we put their photographs and so on of their original towns and so on, and also a photograph of the Virgin of Guadalupe, which of course is the guardian angel of Mexico. No? So this little work, it tells you, and you can be 2 minutes and say, well, what an interesting movement of walls. And then you see to the landscape, of course, that's an agricultural landscape. Or you can be there and there are clips, and they're actually clips that you can see you can read in a museum, telling you how many workers work in these 3 industries in California. Why is California the most important agricultural state in terms of value, or the wines, or the construction, and so on and so forth. You can be there half an hour, just looking and informing yourself. So I asked my client, I told him, well, the project is getting very political, so do you mind it being political? I said, no, on the contrary, it's fantastic. That's what we want, And interestingly enough, yes, it went to the New York Times, and then also the national broadcasting, the radio broadcasting in the United States. They interviewed us for this project, So this is what you want, This is also another part of our job, To be political, to be sensitive, to be sensitive about it, about what you're doing. Many other artists and landscape architects did excellent jobs and so on, but this was the one that actually was supposed to be there for 2 years, and it's been there now for 20 years. So they asked us to redo the graphics and so on, but it's still there, you see. And I think it's it. So you have to have the opportunity to talk about something, and to be sensitive about something, and about big issue between our 2 countries, And this phenomenon of the 21st century now, which is exacerbated all over the world, So that's the position. Also, another way to be an activist is by writing. I have put the books there. The books, Brenda, please. I'm sorry. First the faces of the people. So it's in faces of the people in the Cornerstone Garden. Yes. Okay. These were 3 of the 5 people that constructed the garden. This is the heart of agriculture. We asked the poet to do some poetry about these conditions. He's a poet from the border in El Paso and Juarez, and he talks about his mother, collecting ajo, collecting garlic, and says garlic is very difficult because it's very acid for your hands and so on. So he talks about being carried by his mother through the fields, and it is collecting this garlic fields and so on, and then the hands and so on, and how finally that it gets to the all of the production of a salad in California. No, that salad comes from the hands of many workers which are immigrant, and so on. So then I asked them if I could put their photographs there, and they said, well, we're very worried about the migra and so on. And I said, well, I'm not going to put your names, and you're going to put your photographs there. I said, okay. So we put the names of famous artists in Mexico. Their names this is Pedro Infante, Javier Solís, one of the most important actors and song and crooners of Mexican Mexican folkloric music, It is also, California is the most important agricultural state in the U.S. See, for 1 million migrants trying to enter in the U.S. were stopped and returned in 2003. So this was done in 2005. So anyway, this is the story of this project, which I like very much. And it is about this activism, Then the other part of activism is through writing. And please, Brenda, now change to the. See, for instance, I wrote with this booklet, actually, not a book, this booklet, Mexico Urbano, in the late 70s, with Julio Garcia Col, another urbanist in Mexico. It was a series of testimonies, and so I talk here about the conditions of Mexico, in the conditions of the cities of Mexico, and so on. As I have worked in the National Institute of Workers National Institute of Housing for the Workers for 5 years, and then I wrote this little book here, and then pásale, go on. Another one, yes. Then also in that time, I wrote these principles of environmental urban design. It's a book for beginners, let's say, for first year students and for people. This manual kind of thing was going to be distribute it to mayors in small cities, so they would understand what urbanism is about and how you do. And so this is about the 250 pages. But now this book has become a first year book for architects in Mexico and in Latin America. So this is another kind of activism that you can do. The third one is writing in newspapers. Put the other newspaper. Also in the 80s, I launched a magazine called Entorno, which means the all around. As you can see, it's architecture, landscape architecture, urban design, and the environment. And with 2 other architects, we launched this project. We were able to survive for 4 years, for 4 or 5 years, because it was in a time when Mexico was going through the continuous devaluation. So we went bankrupt. We could not continue it, and we made the point to either interview or have articles around the urbanism and around the landscape, also about architecture. And it was very successful, this magazine, for 4 or 5 years. We went to 10, more or less 10 issues. It was a 3-monthly magazine. So also this type of activism is very important in our profession. And another one, please, Brenda. This is also some writings that I started to do in newspapers. This was in La Jornada, a kind of a leftist newspaper in Mexico City, which is called City and Nature at the End of the 20th Century. This was also some newspaper participation, and so also in other magazines and so on. So writing is also very important, even if you don't write well. It's important to activate, to be active, and also now that I am working in these projects, I make a point to go and discuss with the authorities about the project, and to also we used to we used to visit some old projects, and if they were not taken care of or went down, I used to call some newspaper man that I knew, these writers, and then this is the only way you can activate politicians through a newspaper hit. No, it's what is there's that saying in Mexico. It's what's the en qué what are similar between flies and politicians? Well, they both respond to newspaper hits. So that has been also some other aspect of the work. So anyway, it's 4 o'clock. We only covered two or three questions, but it's been very fun.
Well, I've got one more question for you,
Yes.
and then we're going to take a couple of the questions that we have from the audience. Just you were just showing us that article about nature in the city, and you have said that everyone has the right to nature in the city. Can you talk a little bit about how you have fought for that right, particularly, and what are your tools?
Yes, yes, definitely. Uh, as I told you, I worked in a new created institute, housing for the workers in Mexico. It's national. I was the first director of urban design, and I traveled all over Mexico, and I found Mexico to be, extremely poor, as you can know, and extremely unequal. It's an unequal society, so I said, we were looking at the housing that they were taking. No gardens, no parks, no nothing, no. And so I came to this to say, well, you definitely need a right to access nature in the city. And why nature in the city? Well, to breathe physically and psychologically, to connect with nature, to mediate between density and agglomeration, to generate, perform environmental services, infiltration, oxygen, temperature, to improve the quality of life, and to just to make the people more happy in very simple terms. I have, when I take students to some of my parks or other parks, I said, look at the faces of the people. Look at the faces of the families. Are they happy? They're laughing. They're happy. Let's go now to the metro station, and let's go to the metro down into the metro station in Mexico City. Look at how they are anxious. They are mad. They're somber. They don't relate. So this is why you need nature, because in nature is where you actually understand your relationship, the old relationship of the aboriginals, with where we come from. We come from nature, and we relate to how nature evolves, and it transforms and so on. And that gives you happiness. That gives you a relationship with life. So I was looking the other day to the cities. Let's say to the 50 most important cities in the world, and what is going to happen. And I found out that, for instance, Lagos, Nigeria is 18, is between 16 and 22 million now. And then there was a beautiful talk by Jeffrey Sachs, the economist, saying that it's going to be the largest city in the world in 2050. And so can you imagine it's growing at a rate of 6% annually. So you can't, you have to plan before, and there's going to be a lot of work for landscape architects, I think, there, because if you want to be equitable, no. Delhi is 33 million. Sao Paulo is between 22 to 23 million. I visited Sao Paulo in the poor areas. It's no nature. No. Jakarta in Indonesia is 29 million. Manila is 25 million. Bangladesh, Cairo, Bangkok, Mexico City. You see, Mexico City, for instance, is 10 million, but the megalopolis is 22 million. So 10 million live in the outskirts of Mexico City, and there's very little open space. When we did the project of Chapultepec Park, which is the most important park, South Central Park in Mexico, we did a research study and say 32% of the people in Chapultepec Park come from the metropolitan area. You see, what does that mean? That they don't have parks, So make the Chapultepec Park receives 22 million visitors a year. It is a beautiful. It's 618 hectares big, but it's still crowded as a park. So we need parks. We need open space. We need places to relax, to feel, to open up. Coming from housing that is 20 square meters, 30 square meters for a family, you can see that there's an incredible need and a right to it. It's as important as water, as important as food, because you need that spiritual and that environmental food, So that's absolutely, we have to work as landscape architects. Imagine all these cities that I told you, they sum up about 200 million, you see, and these of course cities are in the third world. When I tell my students in the US when I give studios, it says this project is going to be in Mexico, and listen, Mexico is part of the 4/5 of the world. The US, Europe, and so on is 1/5, okay? But you're talking about the majority here, So you're going to learn about a place which is like the rest of the world, no? Again, like 4/5 of the world is in development or is poor. So there's definitely need for parks and for recreation and from happy faces of children.
So you are already actually sort of discussing one of the audience questions that we have. You've talked about happiness, and you've talked about the sort of issues of access. What do you think are the key measures of success for parks?
Okay, there are two. From the part of the authorities, the maintenance. And because again, it's like the most sad thing about a public park is it's a decadent park or a park vandalized or a park which is not maintained. From the part of the users is how they use this park, how they make their own in this park, and how they use the park. You see, you see people having lunch because most of another cultural invariant of Mexico is we love to eat in parks, we carry the picnic there to eat and so on. So, and it's in the rest of the world. It's incredible. So yes, if you see families there, if you see, like I say, children, you see runners in the morning, and in the late afternoon and so on, people using the park Saturday, Sunday, Friday afternoon, and so on. It's a successful park. It's the measure is the people. And the best maintenance is the part that is going to be more used, you see. That's why La Mexicana Park here in Mexico City, one of the latest parks that we have built, is very well maintained by the owner, by the community. It's a community managed park. And and all of the kiosk and all of the the different restaurants and so on are rented, and then that rent makes the money to maintain the park, and that has proven incredibly successful. And so it's a park that now receives 2 million people a year. No, it was supposed to be like a neighborhood, not a neighborhood, but a districtal park, from district park. Now people from all over Mexico City go to that park, and it's so they go and they rent, and then the restaurants do well, the businesses do well. So that's a economic kind of a good thing. No, I mean it's an economic, and it's the other way. It's when parks go like this is because they're not maintained, B, they're not secure, they're not, and C, there's no people from there to go. Why go there? No, so quality is very important. Quality of design is very important. Quality of maintenance and quality of activities. No, organized activities, also the operation of the park. Not only the landscape architects, but that's what I say. One thing is the design and the construction. The other one is the maintenance as the operation, and the programming of the park.
I liked one of the phrases you had nested in there, which is the measure is the people. And
Yes,
in all the ways that you just described that.
exactly. For instance, Chapultepec Park is well maintained in general. It's very well maintained in general. It's a huge park, but it's well maintained, and it's incredibly successful park. No, and it gets this 22 million. Well, with the museums and everything, but the park itself gets a lot.
So we have time for one more question. There are so many good questions in the chat and in the Q&A, but we have time for one more. So I'll go for it with one more. I think it's fair to say that landscape architecture is an underrepresented and underheralded field internationally, wherever you are. But something that we see in your projects at GDU and with you, Mario, is a sense that I am picking up on that you really manifest the projects from within. You're not sitting there waiting for RFPs and commissions. So
Yes.
before the design even starts, you're not sitting around waiting for a commission. You have pushed them forward from the ground up. So any advice to the field, to younger practitioners watching, like how do you
Yes.
get these projects birthed when they don't even exist?
Imagine that when I came back from Berkeley, and after I opened my office in 1970, 71st, and then I worked for 2 years, and then I worked in the 72 to 77 in the housing agency. But I said, what am I going to show? I don't have any experience, So, and they didn't know about landscape architecture. They didn't know about landscape gardening, no? And landscape architects were here to cover the wrong things that the architects were doing. It's terrible. So, well, in general, I'm exaggerating this, but let's say that they didn't really know. So I took all the prices, there were booklets that the ASLA used to put out. prized landscapes in little booklets, and I would tell, listen, you see this part, I can do this. He said, I can. So we used to have hundreds of phone calls to get an interview with the authorities, and so I didn't want to do gardens. I wanted to do parks. I wanted to do urbanism, and so I went through a very organized process. Saying, okay, we have 25 institutions that we can hit. And we used to have, for instance, a chart. Say, okay, now they have answered me. They have answered the phone. No, so I have an interview. They asked for a proposal. And then we do have a contract. Yes, okay, we have a project. Okay, of those 25 initiatives, one that was our kind of batting order, no? Batting average. And it was difficult. But the second thing is that you have to be out there the second thing is, even you, this small project, you have to, if it's good, it has to be published. You have to make yourself known. It's important. Thirdly, you have either to teach or you have to to um, eh, to write about it. You have to write or to organize. You have to organize seminars. You have to organize public space. The first big project that we got was because I did a seminar on Mexico City and its open spaces, and it was on TV. And one of the city managers saw it and said, they called us and said, "Can you do a park?" Yes, I can. And he wanted to do a museum actually, and a park. And I said, "Why do you want to do another museum in Mexico City about anthropology? Let's do a park that talks about the city." That talks about so that's the first part we did, the Sosomoc Park, which talks about the history of the Valley of Mexico, no? And we got a prize then in ISLA, and then that was a big thing in Mexico City, to get the prize from the United States, and so on. So that's how you start building up your your profession, no, your professional career. And also you have to, if you are very young, to work in a good office, definitely, even if they're not well paid, to work in a good office or to work in a good institution, a government institution. That's where you learn a lot. Then you can go out to look for jobs or to start out in a good office.
And so I see that we are getting to the end of our time here. I just want to remind everybody that the quiz link is in the webinar chat, and that for those of you that do the quiz, your certificates will be sent out to you via email. So check your email. It will come from Lace's No Reply. And I just want to thank Claire so much for her participation this morning, and also Mario. And I hope for all of you that you have seen this combination both of real humbleness, but also this incredible ambition for the discipline, and that it has also inspired you in terms of the sort of the power and the potential of landscape architecture, which I think, is one of the fundamental goals of this prize. So thank you so much to Mario and to Claire, and thank you all so much for joining the webinar with us today. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On the contrary, thank you very much, Claire. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And thank you very much for the participants. I'm delighted to talk about some of these things. Some of our passion and our life passion, which is, our career, landscape architecture.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye.
Gracias.